The chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystalline floor, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into manufactured clouds that occasionally rained gentle mist upon the assembled delegates. Representatives from 417 species sat, stood, floated, or existed in their preferred configurations around the central podium. This was the Galactic Council's Hall of First Contact, where newly discovered civilizations received their official classification and integration protocols. Ambassador Z-Tharian of the Collective Governance examined the data streaming across his neural interface. Species 7749. Origin: Sol 3, locally designated Earth. Technological classification: Prestellar. Social structure: fragmented nation-states. Military capability: nuclear fission weapons, chemical propellants, basic orbital presence. The report continued for several thousand pages, but Z-Tharian had seen enough. Another primitive world, stumbling toward the stars with crude chemical rockets and tribal conflicts. The discovery had been accidental. A collective survey ship mapping gravitational anomalies in an unremarkable spiral arm had detected electromagnetic emissions from the Sol system. Radio waves, television broadcasts, primitive digital communications leading into space like a child shouting in a library. The survey captain had flagged it for investigation. And now Earth's fate would be decided by beings who had mastered faster-than-light travel before humanity discovered fire. Z-Tharian activated the presentation. Holographic displays materialized above the assembly, showing Earth rotating slowly. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. A beautiful world, certainly, but beauty meant little in galactic politics. The displays shifted to show human civilization. Crowded cities, primitive aircraft, surface-bound vehicles that still burned fossil fuels. Scattered nuclear weapons pointed at each other rather than toward external threats. It was almost embarrassing. Honored delegates, Z-Tharian's translator converted his thoughts into 416 different forms of communication simultaneously. We convened to classify species 7749. As you can observe, they remain locked in tribal conflicts despite achieving basic industrialization. They have fragmented their world into nearly 200 competing political entities. They poison their own atmosphere with combustion byproducts. They have achieved nuclear fission, but use it primarily to threaten each other. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some delegates expressed pity. Others showed contempt. A few registered complete indifference. The Zor-Kellian representative, a being of pure energy contained within a magnetic bottle, pulsed with what the translators interpreted as amusement. They still use chemical rockets, someone noted from the back. Laughter echoed through the chamber. Z-Tharian continued. Their biology is carbon-based, oxygen-breathing, water-dependent, unremarkable. Their lifespan averages 70 to 80 local solar cycles. They are highly emotional, prone to irrational decision-making, and demonstrate concerning aggressive tendencies. However, they do show rudimentary problem-solving abilities and have developed basic quantum theory, though they lack the mathematical framework to properly apply it. The presentation shifted again, showing human conflicts. Wars, violence, destruction. The delegates watched impassively. Every species had such a history, but most had moved beyond it before reaching for the stars. Humanity, it seemed, was bringing their violence with them into space. Recommendation? Asked Consular Mordain, a crystalline being whose species had achieved stellar civilization 12,000 years prior. Standard Protocol 7, Z-Tharian replied. Passive observation. No contact. Allow them to develop naturally for another 2,000 to 3,000 solar cycles. If they survive their current developmental crisis and achieve true stellar capability, we can reassess. If they destroy themselves, as projections suggest has a 67% probability, We catalog their world for potential colonization by more suitable species. It was the standard approach for primitive worlds. The galaxy was vast, after all, and the collective governance had learned patience over millions of years. Let the young species either grow up or eliminate themselves. Natural selection on a civilizational scale. The vote proceeded quickly. 412 in favor of Protocol 7. 5 abstentions. 0 opposed. Earth's fate was sealed with bureaucratic efficiency. They would be watched from afar, their radio signals monitored, their development tracked, but no contact would be made. In the cosmic view, they were children playing with dangerous toys, best left alone until they either matured or inevitably hurt themselves. Z-Therian filed the official report and moved on to the next item on the agenda. Species 7749 would receive a monitoring satellite in high orbit, completely undetectable by their primitive sensors. And that would be that. Another entry in the vast database of primitive worlds. Perhaps in a few millennia, they would be worth a second look. The ambassador had no way of knowing that the monitoring satellite, designated Observer 7749, would begin transmitting alarming reports within a single Earth year. The first anomaly was minor. Human space activity increased by 300% in 8 months. Private corporations, not governments, were leading the expansion. This was unusual, but not unprecedented. The collective had observed several species where commercial interests drove early space development. The second anomaly was more concerning. Humans had begun deploying satellite constellations using reusable rocket systems. The economics made no sense to collective analysts. The cost-benefit ratio of landing and reusing chemical rockets seemed prohibitively expensive. Yet humans were doing it anyway, launching hundreds of satellites per year. By the second year of observation, Observer 7749's reports became genuinely disturbing. Human space launches had increased by orders of magnitude. They were building modular space stations, establishing permanent lunar bases, developing nuclear pulse propulsion systems that, while crude by collective standards, were far more advanced than their previous chemical rockets. Z-Therian reviewed the reports with growing unease. This wasn't normal development. Species didn't advance this quickly, especially not fragmented, primitive species still locked in tribal conflicts. The projections had estimated 3,000 years before humanity achieved true stellar capability. They were compressing that timeline at an impossible rate. The third year brought the development that made Z-Therian request an emergency council session. Humans had achieved sustained nuclear fusion, not the crude, inefficient reactors that most species developed, but compact, high-efficiency designs that rivaled collective technology. Moreover, they had done it through an approach the collective had never considered. Artificial intelligence-assisted research that ran millions of simulations simultaneously. They're using thinking machines. Counselor Mordain observed, crystalline structure flickering with concern. Unregulated, unrestricted artificial intelligence. This is extremely dangerous. The collective governance had strict regulations regarding artificial intelligence. Most species developed AI cautiously, having learned through painful experience that unrestricted machine intelligence could lead to catastrophic outcomes. Humanity appeared to be racing ahead with no such caution, deploying AI systems across their entire technological infrastructure. They don't know the dangers, Z-Therian said. They're playing with forces they don't understand. Should we intervene? Asked a delegate from the Hive Collective, their question transmitted through pheromone translation. Protocol 7 forbids direct contact with primitive species, Mordain reminded the assembly. We observe. We do not interfere. Those are the rules that have governed the collective for 3 million years. But as the 4th year of observation began, those rules would be tested in ways none of them anticipated. The emergency alert reached Zetharian during his rest cycle. Observer 7749 had detected something impossible. He interfaced with the data stream immediately, his neural processors struggling to comprehend what the satellite was reporting. Humanity had detected the observer. This should have been impossible. The monitoring satellite used technology thousands of years beyond human capability. It existed in a shifted dimensional frequency that primitive sensors couldn't perceive. It generated no electromagnetic signature, no gravitational distortion, nothing that chemical rocket species should be able to detect. Yet there it was in the data, a human spacecraft approaching Observer 7749's position with clear intentionality. The vessel was unlike anything in the previous reports. Sleek, powered by what appeared to be a fusion drive. And most alarming of all, it was scanning the empty space, where the observer satellite existed using a technology the collective didn't recognize. Zetharian watched in real time as the human vessel stopped precisely 3 kilometers from Observer 7749. Its scanning intensified. Then, something that made his circulatory fluids freeze. The humans transmitted a message directly at the satellite in the collective's own communication protocol. Greetings to the observers. We know you're there. We'd like to talk. The transmission was flawless. Perfect encoding, correct syntax, appropriate diplomatic phrasing. Humanity had not only detected a satellite they shouldn't be able to see, they had somehow decrypted collective communications and learned to speak their language. Zetharian immediately convened an emergency council session. Within the hour, the hall of first contact filled with agitated delegates demanding explanations. How is this possible? Councillor Mordain's crystalline structure pulsed with rapid color changes indicating severe stress. We've observed them for barely 4 of their years. They were launching primitive chemical rockets. Now they're detecting shifted dimensional technology and speaking our languages? The Zorkellian representative flickered with concern. Have they developed quantum consciousness interfaces? Dimensional folding capability? These are technologies that should take millennia to discover. Zetharian pulled up the latest data. Our analysis suggests they've been reverse engineering physics from first principles, using advanced computational systems. Their artificial intelligences have been running simulations of fundamental universal laws, then testing the results empirically. They're essentially brute forcing their way up the technology tree. That's not how technological development works, protested the Hive Collective delegate. Species progress through logical stages. You can't skip fusion research by running computer simulations. You can't develop dimensional sensing without first mastering gravitational manipulation. Apparently, you can, Zetharian replied grimly. If you're willing to run 10 billion simulations simultaneously and test every single result. They're not following the standard development path because they don't know there is a standard path. They're trying everything at once. The council chamber erupted in agitated discussion. This was unprecedented. The careful models that predicted species development, refined over millions of years of observation, were completely failing to account for humanity's approach. They were developing technology in a chaotic, scattershot manner that somehow produced results faster than methodical species who knew what they were doing. We need to make contact, declared Ambassador Zara of the Nexus Confederation, before this spirals further out of control. Protocol 7. Mordain began. Protocol 7 assumes we're dealing with a species that will take thousands of years to develop, the Zara interrupted. These humans went from basic orbital capability to detecting our monitoring technology in 4 years. At this rate, they'll achieve faster than light travel within a decade. We need to establish diplomatic relations now, while we still have the initiative. The debate raged for hours. Conservative delegates argued for maintaining the observation protocol. Progressive factions insisted on immediate contact. A few voices even suggested more aggressive options, quarantining the Sol system, preventing human expansion before they became a threat. Finally, Councillor Mordain called for order. We will send a delegation. A small vessel, diplomatic protocols, standard first contact procedures. We'll explain the collective governance, offer them probationary membership, and guide their development along proper channels. Agreed? The vote passed with a significant majority. Zetharian, despite his reservations, was assigned to lead the delegation. Within 2 days, he was aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Promise, a beautiful ship designed specifically for first contact scenarios. Elegant, non-threatening, equipped with translators for every known language type, and gifts representing the pinnacle of collective culture. The journey to Sol 3 took 3 days at faster-than-light speeds. As they emerged from FTL at the system's edge, Zetharian initiated standard greeting protocols, broadcasting their peaceful intentions on all frequencies. The response was immediate and came from multiple sources simultaneously. Humanity had established stations throughout their solar system, orbital platforms around Earth, bases on their moon, mining operations in the asteroid belt, even preliminary installations around their outer planets. Each facility responded to the collective vessel with what the translators identified as a mixture of excitement and wariness. Single human spacecraft moved to intercept them, moving at speeds that implied they'd achieved at least basic gravitic propulsion. The vessel was larger than expected, bristling with what sensors identified as both scanning equipment and, more ominously, weapons systems. Zetharian's second officer looked up from his station. Sir, we're detecting energy signatures consistent with fusion warheads, particle beam projectors, and something our sensors can't identify. They're greeting a diplomatic vessel with weapons active? Zetharian couldn't believe it. This is completely against protocol. Perhaps they don't know the protocols, his communications officer suggested. They're a young species. The human vessel took up a position 3,000 kilometers away, maintaining a careful distance. Then a transmission came through, audio-visual this time. The display showed a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform, standing on a bridge surrounded by other humans operating various stations. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth vessel Defiant. We acknowledge your diplomatic identification codes. However, before we proceed with formal first contact, we have some questions. Zetharian was taken aback by the directness. Where were the elaborate greetings, the cultural exchanges, the careful diplomatic dance? Of course, Captain Chun, we are here to welcome humanity into the galactic community. How long have you been watching us? Captain Chun interrupted. The bluntness startled Zetharian. Approximately 4 of your years. Standard observation protocol for newly discovered 4 years. Captain Chun's expression hardened. You've been watching us for 4 years and never made contact. Why? It is standard procedure to allow primitive species time to develop naturally before primitive. The word seemed to cause a reaction among the humans on the bridge. Several exchanged glances. You classified us as primitive. Zetharian felt the conversation slipping away from diplomatic norms. It is simply a technical classification based on technological capability. There is no judgment implied. Many species begin as, we reverse-engineered some of your satellite's technology, Captain Chun said, cutting through his explanation. Your computers are impressive. Very efficient. We found your files on humanity. Your assessments. Your projections. She leaned forward slightly. Your recommendation was to leave us alone for 3,000 years and see if we destroyed ourselves. 67% probability of self-extinction. Those were your numbers. Zetharian felt something resembling panic. They'd accessed the secure files? Broken collective encryption? Captain, you must understand, those assessments were made based on data available at the time. And yet here we are, Captain Chun continued. 4 years later, still alive, still advancing. And now you want to welcome us into the galactic community and guide our development along proper channels. Tell me, Ambassador, what happens to species who don't follow your proper channels? The question hung in the void between their vessels, and Zetharian realized with dawning horror that humanity's response to first contact was not wonder or gratitude, but suspicion and calculated evaluation. The diplomatic meeting took place aboard a neutral station the humans had constructed in orbit around their moon. Zetharian had initially suggested meeting aboard Harmony's Promise, but Captain Chun had politely and firmly declined. She'd proposed Earth instead, but Zetharian found the idea of entering a gravity well controlled by an unpredictable species unwise. The lunar station was the compromise dot as Zetharian's shuttle approached. He got his first close look at human engineering. The station was a massive rotating ring, generating artificial gravity through centrifugal force. Primitive, but functional. What disturbed him were the defensive installations visible on every section. Weapon batteries. Shield generators using technology that seemed to blend collective principles with uniquely human innovations. And sensor arrays that were actively scanning his shuttle in ways that felt invasive. The docking procedures were efficient if overly cautious. Armed human guards escorted Zetharian and his small delegation through corridors that somehow managed to feel both welcoming and threatening. Artwork decorated the walls showing human achievements. The first moon landing, space stations being built, ships traveling to distant planets. A species documenting their rapid ascent with obvious pride. They entered a conference room where a delegation of humans waited. Captain Chun was there, along with representatives from various Earth nations and organizations. A Chinese scientist, an Indian engineer, an American military officer, a European diplomat, an African economist, representatives from South America, the Middle East, Southeast Asia. Humanity's fragmentation was on full display. Yet they presented a united front to the alien visitors. Ambassador Zetharian, Captain Chun began, gesturing to a seat designed to accommodate his physiology. The fact that they'd researched his species' requirements showed preparation. Thank you for agreeing to meet here. Of course, Zetharian replied, settling into the seat. I hope this can be the beginning of productive relations between humanity and the collective governance. That depends, said Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Japanese representative. We've been analyzing the data we recovered from your observation satellite. We have concerns. Zetharian's diplomatic training kicked in. I understand that discovering you are being observed might be disconcerting, but I assure you this is standard practice. The collective has guided hundreds of species through guided, interrupted General James Morrison, the American military officer. Interesting word. Your files suggest that species who don't accept your guidance face significant obstacles. Trade restrictions, technology embargoes, in some cases military containment. Only in extreme circumstances where a species poses a threat to, and who decides what constitutes a threat? Asked Dr. Amara Okonkwo, the African economist. You classified us as primitive and potentially self-destructive. If we hadn't discovered your satellite, you would have continued watching us for centuries, perhaps millennia. What if we developed in ways you didn't approve of? What then? Zetharian felt the conversation slipping into dangerous territory. These humans had clearly spent their time preparing, analyzing, strategizing. This wasn't the odd first contact he'd expected. The collective operates on principles of mutual cooperation and shared prosperity. We don't impose our will on member species. But you do have rules, said Ambassador Pierre Dubois, the European diplomat. Your files were quite detailed about acceptable development paths, restrictions on artificial intelligence, limitations on genetic modification, prohibitions on certain weapons technologies. Species who violate these rules face consequences. Reasonable regulations to prevent catastrophic mistakes, Zetharian explained. Many species have nearly destroyed themselves through uncontrolled AI development or genetic experimentation. We've learned from millions of years of collective experience. Dr. Rajesh Kumar, the Indian engineer, leaned forward. And that's precisely our concern, Ambassador. You want us to skip the learning process, to follow your rules based on your experiences. But we're not you. None of your species are like us. All intelligent species share fundamental characteristics, Zetharian countered. The laws of physics are universal. The dangers of certain technologies are consistent regardless of, are they? Captain Chun activated a holographic display. It showed comparative data, humanity's development curve versus typical species development curves. The human line shot upward at an angle that made Zetharian-S other examples look nearly flat. We've achieved in 4 years what your models say should take centuries. We're not following your standard development path because we don't develop like your standard species. Dr. Tanaka added, our approach is fundamentally different. We don't advance through methodical, linear progression. We try everything simultaneously. We fail constantly. Most of our experiments don't work. But the ones that do work, we scale up immediately. It's chaotic, inefficient by your standards, but it produces rapid results. Too rapid, Zetharian said before he could stop himself. You're advancing faster than you can properly understand the implications of your discoveries. This is dangerous. Dangerous to whom? General Morrison's question was pointed. To us, or to the established galactic order? The room fell silent. Zetharian realized they'd reached the core issue. You think the collective sees you as a threat, don't you? Captain Chun's voice was calm but firm. Your own files project, and at our current rate of development, will achieve technological parity with the collective within 20 to 30 years. We'll match species that have had millions of years head start. And we're doing it without following your rules, without accepting your limitations. That has to be concerning for civilizations built on stability and predictable hierarchies. Zetharian couldn't deny it. The scenario analysis buried deep in the classified sections of the observation reports had flagged exactly this possibility. A species developing too quickly, refusing to integrate into established systems, potentially disrupting the careful balance the collective had maintained for eons. So what do you want? He asked, abandoning diplomatic deflection for directness. Ambassador Dubois spoke carefully. We want to engage with the galactic community on our own terms. We're willing to join your collective governance, but as equal partners, not as students needing guidance. We'll share our technology, our approaches, our innovations. In return, you share yours. We learn from each other, not from you dictating to us. The collective doesn't work that way, Zetharian said. There are tiers of membership based on development level. New species begin with limited access, and gradually, we're not a normal new species, Dr. Kumar interrupted. Your own data proves that. We're offering you a choice, Ambassador. Partner with us now as equals, or watch us develop on our own and potentially become competitors rather than allies. It was a bold negotiating position, possibly even arrogant. A species that 4 years ago had been lobbing chemical rockets into low orbit was demanding equal status with civilizations millions of years old. By all traditional metrics, it was absurd, but Zetharian had seen the data. He'd watched humanity's impossible progress. He'd experienced firsthand their ability to crack collective encryption, detect invisible satellites, and reverse engineer advanced technology. They'd done in 4 years what shouldn't be possible in 4 centuries. "I don't have the authority to make such agreements," he admitted. "This would require a full council vote, extensive debate, possibly years of negotiation." Captain Chun smiled slightly. "Then I suggest you communicate our position to your council clearly, Ambassador. Because with or without the collective's blessing, humanity is reaching for the stars. We'd prefer to do so as your friends rather than as an unknown variable that keeps you up at night." Dr. Okonkwo added, "We've already made significant progress on faster-than-light travel. Our theoretical physicists believe we're 6 months from a working prototype. Once we have FTL capability, we'll begin exploring neighboring systems. We'll establish our own presence in the galaxy. The question is whether that happens with the collective's cooperation or despite it." The meeting continued for hours, with human representatives presenting detailed proposals for technology exchange, joint research initiatives, and mutual defense agreements. They'd thought through every aspect, prepared for every objection. This wasn't a primitive species stumbling into galactic politics. This was a civilization that had studied the game, understood the rules, and decided to rewrite them. The emergency council session was the most contentious in recent memory. Tharian's report had sent shockwaves through the collective governance. A primitive species demanding equal partnership, threatening to expand into the galaxy with or without permission, claiming they were months away from faster-than-light travel. It was unprecedented, alarming, and for many delegates, infuriating. "They're bluffing," insisted Councillor Mordain, crystalline structure flashing with angry reds. "No species achieves FTL in 4 years. It's theoretically impossible. They're posturing, trying to leverage their minor technological gains into concessions they haven't earned." Ambassador Tsara disagreed. "Their track record suggests we shouldn't dismiss their claims. They've exceeded every projection we've made. If they say they're close to FTL, we should believe them." The Zor-Kellian representative pulsed thoughtfully. "The real question is what we do about it. If humanity refuses to follow standard integration protocols, do we have the authority to enforce compliance?" That question hung heavy in the chamber. The collective governance had rarely needed to use force against emerging species. Usually, the promise of advanced technology and galactic trade was enough to ensure cooperation. Species wanted to join the collective, wanted access to its resources and knowledge. The idea of a species choosing independence, possibly even opposition, challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. "We could quarantine the Sol system," suggested a delegate from the hierarchical union. "Establish a blockade, prevent them from expanding until they agree to proper integration." "With what?" Tharian asked quietly. "Their weapon systems are primitive by our standards, yes, but they're numerous, and they're effective within their technological tier. They've fortified their entire solar system in the 4 years we've been watching them. They have fusion missiles, particle beams, railgun installations on asteroids and moons. A blockade would require significant military resources, and it would be a hostile act against a species that hasn't actually done anything wrong except develop too quickly." "They hacked our satellite," someone protested. "They accessed classified information we were keeping about them," Zara countered. "One could argue they had a right to know what we were saying about their species. Legally, our position is questionable. We were conducting surveillance without consent on a sovereign species in their own star system." The debate spiraled into legal technicalities, military assessments, and philosophical discussions about the nature of the collective's authority. Hours passed without consensus. Some delegates wanted aggressive action to maintain the established order. Others urged caution and compromise. A few suggested completely withdrawing and leaving humanity alone to develop, observing from a distance without interference. Finally, Councillor Mordain called for order. "We need more information before making any decision." Ambassador Tharian I'm authorizing you to return to Sol 3 and request a demonstration of their claimed FTL capability. If they're truly as advanced as they claim, we'll need to adjust our approach. If they're exaggerating, we'll know we're dealing with desperate bluffing. Zetharian accepted the assignment reluctantly. 3 days later, he was back in the Sol system, transmitting a request to observe humanity's FTL technology. Captain Chun's response was almost immediate. We'd be happy to demonstrate, Ambassador. In fact, we're conducting our first crewed FTL test flight tomorrow. You're welcome to observe from your vessel. We'll be transmitting telemetry data throughout the flight. The next day, Zetharian positioned Harmony's Promise at a safe distance from Earth's moon. Sensors focused on the human test vessel. It was called Breakthrough, a sleek ship perhaps 1/10 the size of his diplomatic vessel. Human crew members, visible through the viewports, made final preparations while ground control ran through extensive checklists. "This is Breakthrough," came Captain Chun's voice over the communication channel. She was piloting the test flight herself. "Beginning FTL sequence in 60 seconds. Zetharian watched his sensors carefully. Humanity couldn't possibly have developed true faster-than-light travel. They must have achieved something else, perhaps a high-efficiency fusion drive or local space folding, and we're calling it FTL through misunderstanding. The countdown reached 0. Energy readings around Breakthrough spiked dramatically. Space itself seemed to ripple around the vessel. Zetharian S sensors registered something that made his circulatory system freeze. A stable warp bubble forming around the human ship, using principles that seemed to combine traditional Alcubierre geometry with quantum entanglement. In ways the collective had never attempted, Breakthrough vanished. His sensors tracked it accelerating beyond light speed, heading toward the outer system. The telemetry data flooding in showed impossible readings. The ship was moving at approximately 50 times the speed of light, with stable field integrity and minimal energy expenditure. It was crude compared to collective FTL, which could achieve thousands of times light speed, but it worked. Humanity had cracked faster-than-light travel. 15 minutes later, Breakthrough dropped out of FTL near Jupiter, having crossed the solar system in less time than it took Zetharian to process what he was witnessing. The ship immediately jumped again, appearing near Mars, then near Venus, then back to Earth's moon. Multiple consecutive FTL jumps, each one clean and controlled. "How do you like our warp drive, Ambassador?" Captain Chun's voice carried obvious pride. "We call it the Chun-Kumar drive, after the physicists who developed the theoretical framework. It's not as fast as your drives yet, but we're working on improvements. Generation 2 designs should hit several hundred times light speed. We're aiming for that within the year." Zetharian could barely form words. "This is... How did you..." "Lots of computer simulations, like we told you. We ran approximately 40 billion different warp field configurations through our AI systems, testing every variation we could imagine. 99.99% of them failed. But the ones that worked, well, you just saw the results. We're not bound by knowing the right way to do things, so we try every wrong way until we stumble on something that works." The implications crashed over Zetharian like a wave. Humanity had achieved in months what most species took millennia to develop, and they'd done it through brute force experimentation that any rational civilization would consider wasteful. Except it wasn't wasteful if it worked. And it clearly worked. "I need to report this to the Council," he said quietly. "Of course," Captain Chun replied. "And when you do, please convey our formal proposal again. We want to join the Galactic Collective as equal partners. We have a lot to learn from you, and we think we have a lot to teach as well. Our methods might seem chaotic to species accustomed to structured development, but they produce results. Imagine what we could achieve together if you shared your millions of years of knowledge." and we applied our approach to accelerating research. We could solve problems that have stumped galactic civilization for ages. Zetharian transmitted his report to the Council in real time, including full sensor logs of Breakthrough's FTL demonstration. The response was swift. Emergency session called. All delegates required to attend immediately. Humanity's status to be completely re-evaluated. A session that followed lasted 3 days. Delegates argued, debated, and struggled to accept that their carefully ordered galaxy had been disrupted by a species that refused to follow the rules. Some still pushed for containment, but the military analysts made clear that humanity's rate of advancement meant any containment effort would be temporary at best. In a few years, human technology might match the collective's. In a decade, they might surpass it. Finally, Councillor Mordain proposed a radical solution. We create a new category of membership, partner status, with full rights and responsibilities from the beginning. No probationary period, no gradual integration. We treat them as equals immediately. This sets a dangerous precedent, protested Mordain's usual allies. Every emerging species will demand the same treatment. Let them, Zara said firmly. If they can achieve what humanity has achieved, they'll deserve it. But we all know most species can't and won't. Humanity is an anomaly. We can either fight that anomaly and risk turning a potential ally into a rival, or we can embrace it and benefit from their unique approach. The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity would be offered full partnership in the collective governance. The first species in collective history to achieve such status within a decade of first contact. Zetharian delivered the news personally, returning to the lunar station, where Captain Chun and her delegation waited. The Council has voted to offer humanity full partnership status in the collective governance, he announced formally. You will have complete access to our technology databases, full voting rights on Council matters, and equal standing with all member species. In return, we ask that you share your technological approaches and work cooperatively within the collective framework. The human delegation exchanged glances. Then Captain Chun stood and extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. We accept, Ambassador. Earth looks forward to a long and productive relationship with the Galactic Collective. As Zetharian grasped her hand, completing the gesture, he reflected on how much had Chong